Well, this gets into the next thing you had said, which is a generational shift towards disillusionment and nihilism and a refusal to find meaning in work. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I do find that there is definitely a relationship between the nihilism, is the perfect word for it, because I knew people like that in my corporate life. It's just very strange to me to want to live in that world of disillusionment.
Well, here's the thing. This is a large problem. I think the internet amplified it, but it's been going on certainly from before the internet. Like, you know, it's been going on for decades and decades. Like,
what you do in Initech is you take the specifications from the customers and you bring them down to the software engineers.
Yes, that's right.
Well, then I just have to ask, why couldn't the customers just take them directly to the software people, huh?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because engineers are not good at dealing with customers.
So you physically take the specs from the customer?
Well, no, my secretary does that, or the fax.
So then you must physically bring them to the software people.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
To pick just one department of it, right? The population of the USA used to be much more religious than it is today, for example. And that's one way of seeing the world and seeing life in a way that there's meaning, right? Like, you know, especially if you're trying to be a smart person, like you're a college educated person or whatever, there was this weird cultural idea that the smart people are all atheists, and if you're religious, you're dumb.
Entering into the early modern period, we sort of made an assumption that if you have a decent roof over your head, if you can get your material needs satisfied, if you can have enough material needs so that you can satisfy some of your other emotional needs, and it's a pretty strong argument. If all of these things are working together, well, you should be satisfied. But, you know, fairly early on, people like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky look at this and begin to say, it doesn't really seem to work. But what we begin to discover in the West is that this project of harnessing the physical universe in order to satisfy ourselves doesn't seem to work. Now, of course, Jesus made suggestions about that a very long time ago. You can gain the whole world, but lose your soul. And it's like, well, what if we decide we don't have a soul and we just stick with the world? Well, the funny thing was that the soul began to crop up. And I think that's sort of where we're at now.
And that idea, uninvestigated by itself, just convinced people, I think, or whatever. But actually, if you go back, like a lot of the real smart people who like invented the modern world were all intensely religious or had their own private spirituality or whatever. One of the lines of research that I did for The Witness, you know, there's all these audio logs in there, but they're not fictional. They're like from history.
I maintain that the cosmic religious feeling is the strongest and noblest motive for scientific research. Only those who realize the immense efforts and, above all, the devotion without which pioneer work in theoretical science cannot be achieved are able to grasp the strength of the emotion out of which alone such work, remote as it is from the immediate realities of life, can issue. What a deep conviction of the rationality of the universe, and what a yearning to understand, were it but a feeble reflection of the mind revealed in this world, Kepler and Newton must have had to enable them to spend years of solitary labor in disentangling the principles of celestial mechanics. Those whose acquaintance with scientific research is derived chiefly from its practical results easily develop a completely false notion of the mentality of the men who, surrounded by a skeptical world, have shown the way to kindred spirits scattered wide through the world and through the centuries. Only one who has devoted his life to similar ends can have a vivid realization of what has inspired these men and given them the strength to remain true to their purpose in spite of countless failures. It is cosmic religious feeling that gives a man such strength. A contemporary has said, not unjustly, that in this materialistic age of ours, the serious scientific workers are the only profoundly religious people. Albert Einstein, 1930.
They include writings of physicists and philosophers and people like that. And so one of the things I did is I spent a bunch of time reading stuff written by a bunch of the people who figured out quantum mechanics. And those guys had a lot of different beliefs. And you would be a fool to think that they were all like generic atheists in the way that you think of today, right? But yet everybody is somehow convinced that the smart people are like generic atheists.
The world just didn't make sense anymore. It didn't make rational sense to me, and I didn't see why I needed to sort of cleave to rational notions about things when it just didn't make any sense.
Does that include souls, do you think? Do you believe that... I know a lot of people write into you on Red Hand Files talking about whether they feel that their loved ones who have deceased are still around in some sense. Do you believe that? Do you believe that after we go, there is something left behind?
I don't know. I don't know about that. Whether that's true or not, I think that they are necessary, or they certainly help lead you back to the world. And so I have great respect and compassion for people who have these feelings and people who have spiritual beliefs or religious beliefs, and their great need, that is looked down upon by, I was just for some punishing myself by watching Dawkins talk about the lack of dignity in these sorts of religious beliefs, and that it was like like having to have a baby with a dummy, and it just seems like such a heartless view of things to
kind
speak
of atheist fundamentalist.
To speak of people's deep needs in that way, and it's very much, I think, holding on to these things that may not be true, that are the very things that lead you out of that place.
In terms of actually things that are more important, like what is life about, and what should you believe in, and how should you behave? Like, we're now living in a complete vacuum almost. Like, you have to find those things more locally somehow, right? Like in a smaller social group, or you somehow collide with friends who you gel with and you form like a shared ethos or something like that. And this is just I think very demoralizing. And the problem is there might be some ways in which it's actually true that you're smarter if you're demoralized, because at least, if you imagine some big military bureaucracy from the past that was constantly broadcasting state propaganda to its people, and you blindly believe all that, you could be happy in the moment believing that stuff, but maybe you're also kind of dumb.
Who's the guy back in the 20s, Freud's cousin, who invented all the advertising strategies?
It's like his nephew.
Yeah. But like one of his things was you got to place the advertising like 9 times before someone actually does it. You just got to flash it, flash it, flash it, flash it, flash it, flash it. And then eventually you remember embody, and then you repeat it. Then you do it. Then you act it out or whatever.
The greatest gift is the smile you give to your brother.
Hi, good to see you. May I help you?
2 Big Macs and a chocolate shake.
Would you like some French fries with your order, sir?
Would that be 3 filet, 2 cheeseburgers, and 4 Cokes?
Good morning, sir. May I take your order, please?
No, we don't. How about a chocolate shake? That'll be fine.
A Coke? Yes, sir. Here you are, sir, and come back soon.
But like, are we really smarter now? I mean, are we really not in a military bureaucracy that's constantly broadcasting state propaganda that most people believe, right?
It's crazy.
And so, but also we're not happy from day to day either. We're not getting that part of the deal.
You're speaking my language here. Yeah.
So then to tie this back into the main discussion, of course that's going to affect people's work life. If you don't have a life that helps you feel inspired and helps you find meaning, and if work is not part of that meaning, then again, you end up in this weird, picture of work that people have on the internet, which is like, oh, you're a wage slave, or work is only about trading your time for money. It's not about bettering yourself. It's not about learning about the thing that you're doing and improving yourself as a person. It's not about
carving. It requires of me more attention. You can see it's like I'm going slower. I'm not just banging away at it like I did with the stone carving. Stone carving, I find, is more natural to me. Also because I can use a mallet and...
Your hair and scalp can't take the heat. Myth. The fact is, Head & Shoulders Ocean Lift with Sea Mineral Essence formula keeps your scalp and hair invigorated and 100% flake-free through the hottest summer days.
Working together with other people to make something bigger than yourself. These are all things that people respond to and feel meaning in. And we've decided that for the most part, most of that isn't a thing. There is, corporate cultures locally do try to resurrect some of this because it's in their interest to do so. Like if they can try to convince you that you could feel meaning by making something bigger than yourself with your coworkers at that company. But of course, the company down the road.
It's really about what's real. As you were chatting, I kept thinking of Douglas Steere, who was a 20th century Quaker spiritual writer, said to pray is to pay attention to the deepest thing I know. And it's to attune and align to ultimate reality. But if you're in a materialist framework, and you don't have to live in Portland and some super secular context, most of the Western world is just very materialistic, just meaning what is real is what you can empirically verify in a lab. And inside that kind of a worldview, that is the air we breathe. We cannot not be influenced by that. But if prayer is actually if actually the material world is the blurred world, and the spiritual perception, which includes material reality, and doesn't just transcend it, it incorporates it. If that's actually the real, seeing the world through the lens of God, his presence, his promises, his history, his redemptive history, if that's actual reality, and my New York Times every morning is actually the very distorted version of reality, then actually in prayer, I'm not vacating reality, I'm coming back to it and relearning how to see the world through its lens.
There is in mainstream American culture, and again, this is not true if you go to certain local areas, but in mainstream American culture, there isn't really respect for work, and there isn't really, we've lost sight of these ways in which you can use work to help make yourself better. And that's bad. And of course people are not going to be that good at working on things, right? What do you expect?